and just swelling up.
I never felt tired. And towards the end, when I pulled my knee or my hamstring or something, we had to do the big scene at the end where we're running from the explosion in the background. And, I just, got that competition. So I want to show Mark that, shit, the little guys can't run. And, brothers, we got to stride. And I think I pulled my damn hamstring trying to outrun him from the blue screen.
The worst injury of all was suffered by Japanese heartthrob Masaya Kato during the filming of the climatic fight scene in the Apollo 14 nightclub.
During the last scene climax, and Toby once in a punch hit my inner chest. I got my rib cracked. I didn't tell the director, but I was really in pain. But my character is emotionless, so I can't show my emotion, so always have to be cool. So that was very, very hard time for me.
A particularly memorable experience for all three principal stars was the explosive finale to the motel battle sequence. In the absence of a budget for CGI effects, real life-size projectiles were fired just over their heads to create the level of authenticity Steve required for this key sequence.
Brittany, Kadeem, and I, we come running around the corner of the motel, and we're just running away from the baddies. And we come around, and there's old J.P. Ferguson with his rocket launcher, right? He's got a rocket launcher. As we come around the corner, he's coming around, pointing at us, and the three of us realize, oh boy. So we're like, running away from this whole thing. And on the previous take, I guess we had run maybe too soon or too fast, and there was a big gap between the rocket and our heads. And it's probably Steve, because he likes getting us in dangerous situations, but he said, try play it a little closer and stuff, so we did, and I could kind of feel the wind go right past my head, and I was hoping that was close enough, but you never know with Koichi and Steve,
Oh, and I love the explosion, because I really got to be there for that, and I felt that. When they blew up the hotel, when Madison blows up the hotel, and we worked it out, Koichi, we ran, and we had to jump in the air and blow. I've always, that's why I wanted to be an actor from the time I was a kid, so that, you could pretend like the world was ending or things were blowing up and people were shooting, and at the end of the day, nobody's hurt. It's just, pretend. So this is the first time I really got to do it, because I've been doing comedy, but comedy without action, comedy, just a different, sitcom and other kind of stuff. When we were running and they shot those missiles at us, and I could actually hear the first one, because I was next to Brittany and Mark was in the back because he was the Superman. So when that thing whizzed by his head and bust through that window, there was an adrenaline, I know we were supposed to kind of pace ourselves and take our time running through each one, because it was like run, bang, run, bang, run, bang, and then run and then jump. After the first bang, I went to 5th gear, and I was like, I'm getting the hell out of here, man. This fucking thing might hit me.
As well as working 24/7 to make the fights come within the meager budgetary requirements, Steve also hired second unit director and miniature effects wizard Wyatt Weed and sound impresario Les Claypool to work their magic and give Drive some real production values in these vital areas at a fraction of the normal cost.
Due to the numerous locations, the nightclub, the ships at the beginning, all these places, we knew we would need a good Foley team. And I knew of a pair of Foley guys, John Cucci and Dan O'Connell, who had done huge movies. I mean, their mainstay is things like Con Air, Nutty Professor, all A-level films. They do a lot of action films, The Rock. And we knew we really couldn't afford them, but we knew they were perfect for the job. So what we ended up doing was spotting out key things that would be really important for them to do, signature effects, like all the sounds of the ship in the beginning, running up and down all those metal grates, and a lot of the fight sounds and clothing flutters and things, stuff we knew they'd be really good at. We pegged them to do all of those sounds, and then more of the generic sounds we just had other people do, like setting, there's no reason to hire those guys to set down glasses and take off glasses and rustle pieces of paper and things. So we had them do the specialty stuff, and it made a huge difference. They're just, we bow to them. They are quite amazing at what they do.
A key effects sequence for the second unit team was the spectacular demolition of the Apollo 14 nightclub at the end of the movie.
The explosions there were handled by Joe Viscoso, who we all know, he revolutionized miniature pyrotechnics. He did the explosions in Star Wars and then moved on to, you know, things like Independence Day, where I think he blew up more stuff than in any other film ever. But he was using a lot of the same pyrotechnic mixes that he had used on Apollo 13. And if you watch the sequence where the final big hotel explosion goes off and the rocket flies up into the air, if you look at the flame underneath, it looks just like the flame of the Saturn V rocket starting up in Apollo 13. He used almost the exact same mix. And it was really exciting to know that we were using Apollo 13 technology on our film. We had one chance to do that. There was no reset, we'll be back in 2 days to shoot it again. And we didn't have, like, you know, a truck full of replacement parts. It was one time, you do it once, you get the best you can. So I was the one on the wire to bring the rocket over on cue. And the adrenaline rush you get when you realize, okay, you got 20 guys out there and you got cameras rolling high speed and it all depends on this, and you've got the wire. And if you don't hit the cue right, you don't have an explosion scene.
Watch this. This is new. Watch this. Wyatt, thank you. It was a very good job.
Oh my God, I recorded it.
Whereas Steve and I had long history of watching Hong Kong films, most of the sound team did not. So there was a lack of differentiation between blocks and punches and some of the things that it was so overwhelming. There were so many of them that what Steve and I ended up doing one day as we came back into the studio, since he and I had, you know, years of experience watching this, we actually cut some of them ourselves. We went in and folded blocks and punches, and we were smacking each other around in one of the vocal booths until we were both red, hitting each other in the stomach, and arm slaps, and just trying to get really good sounds for all the fights.
Having battled successfully against the odds to produce one of the most electrifying martial arts action adventures ever made, Steve would suffer the ultimate disappointment at the hands of the studio executives who took his finished project and cut out 16 minutes of footage which Steve felt were absolutely crucial to the overall structure of the movie.
The biggest difference between my version and the HBO version is the change in motivation of Toby Wong's character. In the release version, because so much of his backstory, in fact all of his backstory was cut out, and there's this whole reference to the birthday card and why he was here, because by cutting that out, now Toby came here for the money. He became a mercenary. And I was quite upset about that because that wasn't the character that I was trying to portray as a filmmaker. I thought, who is going to care about a mercenary? A guy comes here for the money, you know. So I really, you know, really had a difficult time kind of getting through that, you know, and just kind of, you know, one thing that's really, I guess, the hardest thing to deal with as a filmmaker is that you don't really have a whole lot of control over your film at a certain point. I finished the movie, it was mixed, DTS, 6-track, delivered. And then a decision came down, you know, where I was not involved, to cut the film down substantially. And by cutting stuff down, every scene you cut out, you start to change the audience's perception of what this film is. And by the time this version was done, it had taken the motivations of the characters and thrown out the window, or changed it completely to the point that it became very shallow. And that was, you know, upsetting because I felt so helpless to not to be able to do anything about it. But I just want the audience, if we're watching this version, to know that you know, that was not my intention. You know, that as a filmmaker, it's my job to make characters, to create characters that they like. You know, that way when they get to the kung fu, they can really root for these guys.
You know, this was one of the few cases I can think of where more was better, because the characters were more fleshed out, the story was more fleshed out, the action was, I mean, everything about the film was so much more fleshed out in the early versions that Steve had done. And there were a lot of people looking at it just in terms of a length, running time, got to get it down, got to get it down. And this is one of those few films where, no, you know, don't get it down. The longer it is, the better.
The main actual score was done by Dave Williams, and I was quite saddened that that was removed from the release cut. It was not something I was involved in because I just felt that my vision was so violated that I didn't want anything to do with it. But what I felt strongly with Dave Williams' music is that it really served the film well, because this film, in trying to do a temp score for test screenings before the film was finished, even I had a really hard time finding sort of temporary music to stick in the film, just to, you know, keep the film pace going, just so the audience can get a general feeling what this film is about. The film was so quirky at times and serious, and it was a hard balance to keep. And that's what I felt was strongly about Dave Williams' score, is that he was able to sustain, and he was able to balance the quirkiness with the action and put the heart in the areas that I really felt needed it.
Producer's cut, unfortunately, they kind of just went for the straight ahead action. These guys are tough, and once they go into this mode, they do it. It still works, I think. But the director's cut is the whole thing. You get the crying, you get the loving, you get the fighting, you get the funny jokes, you get everything. That's the version I like.
Despite the difficulties involved with the shoot and subsequent distribution of the movie, everyone involved with the Drive project is proud of their achievements. The ultimate tribute to the movie and their skill as filmmakers is the incredible reaction it generates with cinema audiences, no matter where it is screened around the world.
We took it to Japan, to the Yuri Film Festival, Japan's second biggest film festival. Went there, the Japanese audience went wild. I've seen films with Japanese audience. They're quiet, they're really respectful and nice, and then when the film's finished, then they'll clap. This movie, they were jumping and screaming and laughing, and I was just amazed at this. And it won the Critics Award there. And then it went to Montreal, and you know, and just we had a screening, and the audience, the same exact kind of reactions, crazy, jumping out of the chair, laughing their head off. And at the end of the film, you know, I mean, end of the festival, they voted it first place, you know, international film. And it was the fans voting it, not a committee, but it actually was the fans. And that really meant a lot to me.
When I've seen my work in other movies, you know, when it comes to the fight scene, in my mind I'll start picking it apart. Oh, that was a bad angle for this, or I should have done this or that. And when I went to Drive and saw the screening of it, oh man, I was so happy. I was so happy because everything flowed and was in context. And when it got to the fight sequences, man, I just thought Koichi's fight choreography was awesome. Steve shot it so well. I mean, he just captured the movement and the moment, not just in the action, but in the emotion, you know. I loved it.